Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button. And if you have any opinions at all that you would like to share, make sure to leave them down in the comment section. Drain Gang, D&G. Drain Gang is a hip-hop R&B collective based in Sweden, with the main members being Tyboy Digital, Echo 2K, and Blade. Of course, I'm sure some of you have seen the plethora of Blade reviews that I've done on the channel. I've grown quite a bit of fondness for the guy and his music over the course of many requests. Thank you all so much for those. However, now it's a little bit different. This time the album is credited to all three members, and with the production being handled by like every name I'm familiar with that worked with these guys, Wosum, White Armor, Rip Squad, Young Sherman, safe to say my hype was through the roof while doing my research on this exquisite posse cut. So just how did D&G live up to that hype? Let's find out as I review it track by track. I couldn't find if there were actually any singles, but that doesn't seem to be too important, so we will just start at the top of the track list, with that being No Life Left, performed by Blade, which kicks off with this eerie, despondent atmosphere, echoed ringing and murky synths, which then makes way for the actual track to come through, and it is one of the most grimy vibes I've heard from any Drain Gang song. Blade delivers what must be one of his most slurred and mumbly deliveries I've ever heard from him, and it plays to this dark, isolated ambience so well. Such an ethereal song in all the best ways. Really like it. Black Boy by Echo 2K definitely picks up the vibe from the opener, being a bit more like your typical trap song, but with the signature buoyant bass and glossy synths, and of course the brittle hi-hats you would expect. It's not the most mind-blowing instrumental out there. Echo's vocals on the track help make it stand out. His melodiousness and lighter timbre shine through the archetypal monochromatic Drain Gang style. It's a good track. First Crush by Blade and Echo, featuring Young Lean, opens up with this spacious, kind of windy ambience, allowing Blade's monotone vocals to ripple throughout the vast emptiness. And while that is pretty good, I love how Echo and Young Lean's deliveries are a bit smoother, and as a result homogenizes with the beat well to amplify the vibe of it. A nice juxtaposition to Blade's stark performance in the mix. Another good track here. NUMB/Beverly Hills is extremely slow. I'd even say overly slow. I can't say I've heard a song from Blade that is so plodding. The vibe for this one is definitely there, a minimal beat with a rupturous bass and a leisurely flow from Blade. It kind of reminds me of something from Eversense and how one note and entrancing it is, but at least Eversense had a bit of that synthetic polish to give it a crystalline twinkle. Comparatively, this song is skeletal. It's a fascinating listen, no doubt, and if you're into it, I totally get it, but this is a bit excessive for me. Not bad at all, but I'm likely not going to keep it around. Cinderella by Blade and Echo is basically the previous track, but given a bit more soul to make it a banger. The bass and hi-hat are almost menacing in how sparse they are, but the synths do create a semi-comforting blanket over top of the track. Blade and Echo have much deeper deliveries on this one than usual, adding to the menacing quality. It's a solid song for sure. Wrong by Tyboy Digital may just be one of the most mellow Drain Gang tracks I've heard to date. It's way more of an R&B song than typical rap. The bass and hi-hat are just swallowed by the tsunami of synth washing over the track, as Tyboy's delivery is pretty comatose. Lyrically, the track doesn't have much substance, especially that chorus that just repeats the same phrase multiple times, and the verse is pretty alright too, but all in all, this song just kind of feels a bit half-baked, not much here of note. Can't Trust, again by Tyboy featuring Young Lean, the longest track on the album almost being 5 minutes, and I don't have the most positive experiences with longer Drain Gang tracks, so I went into this one expecting the worst, and thankfully it isn't that bad, but I do think the length is a hindrance to its impact. I like the plucky synths and rustling snare that kick off the track, while Young Lean's delivery is solid for a flow that's pretty dense. Yet again, Tyboy delivers another nothing hook, but the melody on this one is much more appealing and catchy, even if his verse kinda drags a bit. The track has its highs for sure, but this one isn't one I'm dying to keep around either. Wickr Man by Blade is probably one of the highlights for me. I love the moody piano that starts the track, and when the full thing blossoms, it becomes one of the hardest bangers on the album. And I've been kind of craving that energy throughout this so far. The bass and hi-hat reverberate so potently throughout the bleeps and bloops of the synths, as Blade's drony vocals and flow are the centerpieces of the song, just because of how much they truly stand out and again provide a nice contrast there. Really like this song, one of my favorites. GTR by Echo is another pretty good track. It continues Wickr Man's momentum of actual bangers instead of mellow vibes with its slow, glossy synthetic fade-in, leading into these dense pulses of synth, skipping bass, and rattling hi-hat. While Echo delivers the track with that deeper timbre he retained from Cinderella, and it glides over the beat nicely as he raps about the same old you'd expect from the collective. Wealth, cars, drugs, isolation. It's a good tune. I like it. Suffocation by Blade is another pretty solid song. Not the most mind-blowing or revolutionary track I've heard at all, but it does its style well enough. The bass is nice and springy, the starry synths are a pleasing touch, and the hi-hat ties it all together pretty well. Blade's vocals on the track are typical, a little bit more upbeat and charismatic than his usual delivery on the album. It's a decent enough track. Dumpster Baby, again by Blade, is another mellow track, this time utilizing some minor acoustics to flesh out the beat a bit more, and it's pretty solid all around. The plucky guitar oscillating behind the bass, rising synth and hi-hat. Blade delivers a solid enough performance, bit more melody and life behind his voice to match the brighter melody, but he is still firmly in his monotone style. Not a bad track at all, but by this point in the album, this style begins to lose its punch for me. Nosebleed by Tyboy and Echo is definitely one of my favorite of the Tyboy tracks on this album. Feels the most fleshed out and well developed compared to his other ones. Sweet plunky synths, hissing hi-hat and snare, and some bouncy bass. Tyboy's hook and verse is pretty catchy with his deeper delivery that almost makes me think it was Blade singing it, and Echo's got a more serene singing voice in this one, which I also really enjoy. Yeah, just an all-around solid track. Scarecrows by Blade, which opens up with these wintry bells and metallic chimes, kind of makes me think of Christmas, which is the complete opposite of what I expected given the song's title. But when the full song comes in, it's very similar to NUMB/Beverly Hills in just how slow it is, relying heavily on an implied vibe, and it definitely does that better than the aforementioned track. Blade seems a bit more into the aura the song is emitting, delivering a prolonged flow about his isolation and drug use, the same old formula. It's a pretty solid song. BOTOX Lips by Blade is an alright track, but to be honest, this one just doesn't do much for me in the context of a full album. The bubbly synths and bass are nice, but there is zero percussion here, preferring to coast solely on vibes, and it's a very minimal vibe. It's slow, and thankfully it's a bit of a shorter track too, only 2.5 minutes, so it's not a grueling listen, but Blade's delivery almost makes it one with his bored charisma. It's just not a track I'm wanting to return to. Stalker by Blade and Echo continues the same vibe that BOTOX Lips had, and it's just another one I'm kind of okay on. It's not a bad song at all, but man, this style is just getting tedious at this point. And as much as I want to compliment that the atmospheric vibe is good, this one really isn't because the synths are so far back in the mix and the light jabs of them barely leave an impact in the enshrouding emptiness of the track. And unfortunately, this one's even longer, so it's more of a drag to sit through. Even Echo, who's had a pretty consistent performance throughout the album, really feels like he phoned this one in. Yeah, probably my least favorite. Pass. Happily Ever After by Echo thankfully picks the vibe of the album back up, one of the best late album cuts for me, and it instantly hits my nostalgia with these foggy synths in the beginning reminding me of like some iTunes ringtone. I swear I know it from somewhere, but I can't place exactly where. Anyway, Echo's flow is nice, he's got his melodious timbre over this rattling hi-hat and punchy bass, still playing to the mellow nature of the album, but definitely more rooted in a banger, and I gotta commend the track for raising the mood up. This is a fun one. And finally, the closer, Climbing, performed by Tyboy, is another slower track, but it's not some resounding closer, it's just kind of the same drivel the back half of the album has been stacked with, though I do like the playful chimes, zipping synths, and crashing spacious ambience. But I just don't care for Tyboy's vocals here. They kind of feel inessential to the song, very low, sleepy, not that interesting. I guess they do contribute to that vibe, but at least for me, that only makes the song feel more drowsy than ethereal. Bit of a weak closer. Overall, I'm pretty torn on this album, more so than I want to be. I think there are some solid tunes on this one, but it's a much more vibey listen than I expected it to be. Didn't have too many bangers that I typically tend to love that this style delivers. Just a lot of mellow, moody, minimalistic, and borderline ambient tracks at times. I definitely think some of these could have been cut from the final release. It did not need to be almost 50 minutes long. At that length, this style just really began to wear thin, especially on the later tracks. This is not an album I would recommend to someone starting off or maybe trying to get the holistic Drain Gang experience, and I would be willing to bet that only the most die-hard and extreme Drain Gang fans would get a lot out of this. For me, it's a solid enough listen, but the bulk of it feels like the group just came together and half-assed an album purely for fan service. I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 on this album. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.